Let's talk about Death Battle. There is so much that can be said about this staple of the internet. Sure, it may not be anywhere near the oldest show on the web, such as Homestar Runner or Red vs. Blue, but its staying power and impact is undeniable. It managed to kickstart an entire community of nerds, such as myself, trying to figure out the most important question in fiction: who would win in a fight to the death? Now, while I may not be all that into the research side, I'm in this for the cool as hell action. I still have this awesome show to thank for introducing me to so many fun and unique people. What makes this series really special is that, especially when compared to most web shows, there is so much teamwork and collaboration that goes into each episode. DB, as well as similar works, wink wink nudge nudge, gives such a wide variety of people a chance to shine, whether it be writers, mathematicians, voice actors, artists, composers, animators, editors, and so much more. So what better way to show my appreciation than to give my own personal retrospective on Death Battle and what it means to me. This will involve the good, the bad, and a lot of personal opinions. So while I'm going to try my best to be as objective as possible and judge things in the context of when they came out, expect a lot of personal bias. Let's kick off this marathon by taking a look at the season that set everything into motion. When I first watched this show, everything from the host's banter to the pixel animation blew my friggin' mind. I had never seen anything like it, and the novelty of seeing different franchises cross over was a novelty that kept me wanting more. However, this was all the way back in 2011, a time when versus shows weren't really a thing yet, meaning I didn't have much to base my judgment off of. Plus, I was also an easily impressed child whose favorite shows at the time included Barney and Dora the Explorer. Yeah, now that I'm looking back after all these years, it's the first season of an internet show, alright. Not to say Ben wasn't doing his best back then, what with having to do virtually everything from research to writing to recording to animating, and the fact that he managed to do all that in such a time crunch is nothing to scoff at. But, and this is a very big but mind you, let's just say it's a good thing he handed those parts of the job off to people more experienced in the field, sans producing and hosting. It definitely paid off in the long run. Because of this, as well as the usual growing pains that any show goes through in its first season, Season 1 of Death Battle doesn't exactly hold up all that well. Yet, it still has a sense of charm to it. Early episodes of the show have that rustic internet quality to them that's pretty hard not to be reminiscent of given the landscape of the platform now. So why don't we go ahead and dive right in by looking at every episode of the first season. My scores will be based on entertainment value more so than accuracy, which means I'm taking the writing, analysis, battle, and explanation all into account, as opposed to using my own prior knowledge to the characters. I will also refrain from referencing future episodes and only occasionally discuss episodes that released before, as a way of looking at these videos in the context of when they came out in order to avoid recency bias. With that being said, get your nostalgia goggles ready and flame shields hoisted, because we're about to review every episode of Death Battle Season 1 in 10 words or less. Ready? Go! That's what they sounded like? At least the health bars sorta fit here. Anyone want to forget this episode exists? Me too. My first episode. Yeah, it's a miracle I kept watching. Hey, that's pretty good. Well, that was super unpleasant. I've taken pisses longer than this episode. Open the jar, fall on the car. Better than the previous cat fight, at least. Should be my favorite episode on principle. Keyword, should. A down-to-earth fight exploding with charm. Fact, Team 4-Star makes any show better. Watching this and the rematch together is surreal as hell. Leave real life out of my fiction fights, please. Harry Potter, starring Boomstick. No, I'm not kidding. I'm sorry, what happened? I was distracted. Rainbow Dash 4's her enemy to death. Outrun's rockets. I can be faster. In a wheelchair. I'm not dead, you fools. I have 70 alternative accounts. I was too hard on this episode. Hard on. You should have consulted the Elder Gods. Enough blue balling. Give us a rematch already. Strangely, one of the most satisfying death sequences. What does Pokemon taste like? The day the Earth stood still. And then promptly exploded. Oof, those scores make me look like a jerk, don't they? Keep in mind, I'm fully aware of the situation these episodes were in at the time. Ben had a lot of ridiculous crunching to do, and Screw Attack didn't exactly have the budget of Rooster Teeth like they do now. But I think we can all at least agree that some episodes are easier to revisit than others, particularly the ones animated by Jordan Lang. I miss that beautiful bastard whose history with a show I can't be bothered to research. Now, let's go through some of these episodes in a bit more detail with the bottom 5 worst episodes.
Ah, goddamn son of a shit weasel!
Boba Fett versus Samus Aran. Alright, I know it's the first episode ever, but consider the first episode being in the worst list a compliment. It means that things can only get better from here. More or less, at least, given it's only number 5. The only reason it's not lower is because of how much I enjoy watching the first episodes of long-running series, which is something that happens more often than you'd think.
Once upon a time, in the magical land of Equestria.
Golly, I think it's time for some redecorating.
Hey. Yeah? You ever wonder why we're here? It's one of life's great mysteries, isn't it? Why are we here?
Toodles, dickhead!
Donut, what just happened?
The novelty of seeing everything that's changed, such as the voices, animation, and method of coming to a verdict. Seriously though, Wiz and Boomstick sound like babies here compared to now. It's friggin' adorable.
Prime example is Boba Fett, the most feared bounty hunter in the galaxy.
But don't forget Samus Aran. She's so badass, whole planets explode when she's done with them. Boom!
Ah, goddamn son of a shit weasel!
Luke Skywalker versus Harry Potter. This one's honestly not terrible in a remarkable way, but it might be one of the ugliest to look at. Characters as iconic as these two probably shouldn't have been used so soon considering the budget they had. Also, seeing Harry spam the killing spell like some sort of 5-year-old playing COD will never not be funny.
Ah, goddamn son of a shit weasel!
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Battle Royale. Don't be too surprised, even Ben hates this one. I know the concept of this show requires death, but that doesn't make this one any less depressing to watch. Perhaps the concept of 4 brothers violently killing each other could work in the right hands, but if Donnie getting stabbed over 20 times by Raph was any indication, I don't think these hands were up for the job. I don't know, maybe Rise could pull it off. At least the animation would be beautiful.
Ah, goddamn son of a shit weasel!
Rogue versus Wonder Woman. If it weren't for the number 1 pick, I'd posit that this episode aged the absolute worst. Accuracy may not define my view of these episodes, but the way they explain themselves does. The idea that Diana would even allow Rogue to touch her once, let alone long enough to become stronger, is ridiculous. This is assuming that Wendy wouldn't have already killed her like 1,000 times over. More importantly, regarding this episode's placement, however, is the downright Quagmire vibes Boomstick gives off during the analysis. Perverts can be funny, see Tucker and Roshi, but there's a pretty important line between catcalling and straight-up physical assault.
Not that I blame her, though. I'd be holding on to Miss Marvel for as long as I could. Plus, then when she's unconscious, I could... Aside from the obvious cannons resting right below her neck, she's got a pretty bizarre mix of weaponry.
Just because I miss some aspects of the early internet doesn't mean I miss them all.
Ah, goddamn son of a shit weasel!
Justin Bieber versus Rebecca Black. At the time this one released, I thought it was the funniest thing ever, but now that we've grown up, it's just a stark reminder of how immature we all were. Yes, their music sucks. In fact, it still sucks. But putting real people in a video just to have the satisfaction of killing them is pretty petty looking back. And yes, I've seen Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. Ugh. At least the other episodes on this list are timelessly bad. This one is a time capsule of cringe and regret, as well as a template to Cartoon Fight Club's content. But you know what? I like leaving my videos off on a positive note. I really do love this show, and I even love aspects of this season. Not every episode can make the best list, unfortunately. Link vs. Cloud is really cool for being the first fully 3D fight, but at the same time, it's also the show's first fully 3D fight. So keep that in mind when watching. #1 rematch! Batman vs. Spider-Man does that annoying thing where the entire fight feels like it's completely one-sided right up until the very end. Sure, Peter gets some hits in, but due to Bruce's unchanging face, the lack of voice clips and sound design, it didn't feel like those hits meant anything, whereas Spidey was getting his ass handed to him harder than Uncle Ben. Isn't Peter supposed to be stronger? That is, until we get to the end, where we see easily one of the most elaborate and brutal deaths of the season.
Having fun yet? It's all or nothing. Sorry about that. Web swing!
Something about the sound of the web and Josh Keaton's delivery keeps it from ever getting old. It almost makes me forget about the one-sided nature of the rest of the fight. Almost. This episode is also significant for making Batman lose during a time where everyone thought he was invincible, so kudos to the DB team for reminding us that he's still human. Human being the most operative word, of course. This is DC after all.
Yes! Yes! Oh, that was awesome!
Bomberman vs. Dig Dug. Yes, I'm fully aware that Bomberman is universal or whatever, but I've never played the game, so I don't care honestly. Plus, it's my list, so shut up. This is an example of how a low budget can actually enhance the quality. It's a simple fight using incredibly simple characters. Simplicity breeds creativity, and it makes this episode easier to look back on as a result. The analysis even sheds light on the fact that just because a character is cute, that doesn't mean their concept isn't sadistic as hell. Something that Nintendo seems to have down to an art at this point. And that freaking death, man.
Yes! Yes! Oh, that was awesome!
Vegeta vs. Shadow. The fight may not have a whole lot of action, but the replay value mostly comes from the performances of Lonnie Pator and Takahata 101.
That was easier than I thought. I guess I'm better than
Cheap trick teleporting me underwater, coward! Cut the act and give up already! You're nothing compared to me. God damn it.
This episode was the first to introduce voice acting, a trend that would only further evolve from then on. But I gotta say, starting off with a powerhouse like Team 4-Star is not a bad way to start.
Uh-oh.
What the fuck? Yes! Yes! Oh, that was awesome!
Zelda vs. Peach. Here's the thing. I actually used to hate this episode for the longest time. I was one of those people who hated Peach simply because she was a damsel in distress. Well, let me assure you all, I've grown since then, and have learned to love both princesses equally, seeing them as more than just damsels that need rescuing. Depending on the game, Zelda can be awesome, and Peach has a lot more charm and sass than I gave her credit for. So, on rewatch, I realized that I have very little reason to actually dislike this episode beyond, "My character lost, unsubscribe!" Yes, the soccer ball feat is dumb. Well, sorta, but it's not like it was the only explanation used, and it even started the trend of the show using numbers over logic to figure out a victor, so it at least deserves recognition for that much. Now that I'm older, I can even appreciate the jokes that went right over my head, such as the Vibe Scepter bit. It's jokes like these that make me proud to be 20, yet still giggle like I'm 6. Maybe that's why I'm a fan of the game, Grumps.
You think Sonic shits?
If he does, it happens very fast.
Get shit fast! Yes! Yes! Oh, that was awesome!
Thor vs. Raiden. I realize it's become a meme at this point because of how one-sided this episode was, but that doesn't make it bad. Far from it. Thor vs. Raiden has some really killer high-paced action, as well as hits that feel extra powerful to this day, especially for a sprite battle. Just look at some of these blows. The best fights are the ones where you can feel the impact, and that's doubly important in a fight between gods. Top that off with a size doesn't matter joke, the amount of people Raiden has sacrificed, and one of the most over-the-top finishers yet, and you've got a winner on your hands. Not the winner, obviously.
Yes! Yes! Oh, that was awesome!
Goku vs. Superman. I don't care if you're a Dragon Ball fan or a DC fan, this episode still holds up after all these years. You could tell the team put their heart and soul into making this match as grand as possible, and considering the characters being used, they absolutely had to. Sure, the ending analysis drags a little, and yes, they use pretty much every version of Superman, but this episode is the closest this show got to feeling cinematic, thanks to its respect for the source material, use of Team 4-Star, inspired choreography, and planetary proportions. It even serves as sort of an introduction to me for both of these characters and what it meant to be a true hero. And yes, this was my most proper introduction to these two as characters. I was a sheltered child, alright. Goku and Superman are two iconic heroes with different yet equally valid ideologies. I may not have understood why this episode was considered so important at the time, but looking back, Goku vs. Superman serves as the gold standard for what this show is capable of and what constitutes a perfect episode. As for the sequel, well, let's save that for later. But that's just my list. What are y'all's favorites and least favorites from Season 1? Let me know in the comments and be sure to stay tuned for every episode of Season 2 reviewed in 10 words or less. The chaos has only just begun.